All right, once again, as you can see, we're building a new slingshot, and I started out by cutting the core that I'm holding here in my hand. Also as well in the picture-in-picture, I needed to go all the way around the circumference of the frame. Thank you all for joining me here on this building this core. Very tough material, very, I think it's 3/8 inch thick. Once I got that cut out, I am going to be taking it over to the bandsaw. Once I got the holes drilled out, I'll be taking it over to the bandsaw, cutting in between all the little circles that you now see. And once that is done, I will route the edges using a template. Sometimes I sand it, whatever. Either way, you got to do it, whatever tools you have. I then needed to prep the surface of this frame, so I did that. As you can see, this one I'm not putting the slots in it. That's actually a patented band attachment system, so you don't see me doing it too often. A few of my personal frames I don't mind doing it too. You'll see this slim handle on it. That is, of course, in essence of RCC. Many people who've helped me out along the way in building slingshots by releasing YouTube videos, so I figured I would do the same with the ones that I've been putting out. Big DH2000, he's another one on YouTube whose videos I used to watch quite often. There's a bunch of guys. Information's getting a lot more easier to find now than ever before, that's for sure. I'm just glad I'm a part of that community. We will get on to the next piece here. I then used the core as my template to cut out one of the scales, and that is this piece that you see here. It's a little bit thinner, so it was a bit easier going. It'll be my Carta and G10 slingshot. This piece was a lot easier to cut out. I used the drill press and just kind of took my time going around the edges. A little tip here is if you use a much smaller drill bit, when you're sanding it near the end and stuff, I've had some pieces, I've finally figured this out. I've had some pieces where I've used a larger drill bit to drill my holes, just under 3/8, but you know, over a quarter inch drill bit or whatever. Drilling these little tiny holes. Later on, when it would come time for after the glue up, the sanding of it, sometimes I would like sand too much or something, as you know, this stuff can sand away quite quickly. Some will show these marks underneath scale or the palm swell and such. You can see it not only on this side, but on the back side, which would be touching this side of the palm swell. That would kind of leave an unwanted areas that looked kind of wavy and stuff. So I'm really glad that I finally figured out why that was happening to me. It can be the material. However, the last time that it happened, something just wasn't right with me, and then I figured that out. Glad that I could share that with you all as well. Once I got around the edges all drilled out, it was the same process, taking it over to the bandsaw, cutting it out. Kind of funny here because after the bandsaw, I used the core for the scale. I glued them all together with some crazy glue and some painter's tape in between them. I took it over to my router, but my router bit exploded, so I needed a new router bit. I then had to take it over to the sander to finish a lot of the edges on this piece. Other than that, things were going fine and I was moving forward. Once that was done, time to sand the back end and do some of the little piths, the little potholes. Oh, you can see that there. Start moving on to some of the next pieces. I then moved on to the liners. This one here, I used a red liner. It is about 1 millimeter thick, as you can see. I just used some scissors. It's very thin, very easy to work with. I wish it was all this easy. I should have mentioned in the beginning of the video that I drilled the holes out in the scale and the core. I just kept kind of putting piece on top of piece and drilling the holes, which would be the first step that I do to every one of these. So that's what I did with the liner. Drew around it and cut it out. I drilled my holes. I started to scuff it up. I started to sand it. And there you have a roughed up liner. Then we have the palm swell, back ends. So I just kind of repeated the same process. I am learning to get a lot faster at it though. And these will be the liners in between a bolster and the palm swell. Do the same process with these. These are all just rough cuts. I scuffed them up, cut them to size that are workable. They're prepped and ready. This little piece here, which is very hard to work as it's such a small piece, and getting a nice good round edge on it can be quite difficult, a lot more harder than you think. I'm always up for tips. If anybody has any tips out there for anything that you see me doing in the video that you might do different, please don't be afraid to comment and talk about what you do. That's what we're here for. We all learn from somebody. Do not forget that, and shared information is what got us to where we are today. So others can read that information and help themselves to it as well. No hoarding. I cut this out, and this is the bolster that is going to be above the palm swell in between those little liner pieces I just showed you. And this here will be the liner that goes underneath the palm swell, those little liners and the bolster. All right, which brings us to the next segment of our video. So this piece is all ready for glue up. We have the copper tubing, we have some palm swell action, we have some exploding slingshot, we have the mosaic pin. It's going to be a mosaic pin. We have the bolster, we have the liner for the palm swell, and we will also have the scale, and we will also have a liner and a core, as well as these little liner pieces. So yeah, so everything's just all ready to be glued up here, and maybe just go over a couple things real quickly while I can. So yeah, I just want to take a minute to thank a lot of people who put the information out to be making frames like this. Pocket Predator Slingshots. Bill Hayes, he's you know, I think the first person to be making slingshots out of knife handle material like this. I could be wrong, but I might actually be correct on that. There's you know, Nathan Masters from Simple Shot. There's RCC catapults. There's Big DH 2000. There's a lot of people who had information out. Not a lot, but there were few where the information was kind of out there when I needed it. So it's just kind of good to be a part of that community, even though I don't know these people, but there's just kind of something that's some sort of a movement here with slingshots and stuff, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of and to share in that effort as well. It's kind of funny sometimes because I sort of, certain things get under my skin where I'm like, you know, I don't want to share this information, right? I want it all for myself and stuff, but you know, there's always the reminder of you know, that I'm it's better to do this than not, right? Shared knowledge is good. Where it's all going is going to be a really interesting thing to watch as we age too, or maybe it fades out, who knows. It's a fun thing to be a part of. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to glue these things together and stick around. The clamps have now been removed. Epoxy is dry. The next step would be to cut the pins off and then sand and shape it. The slingshot has now been sanded and shaped. Instead of just layering pieces of G10 and micarta that I cut out on a template and just epoxy them together, instead of just doing that, I decided to challenge myself and give it some shape. Now this does take some practice to get a nice, somewhat even look on all sides of the micarta. G10 does sand a lot faster, you know, so you do want to be a lot more careful, but micarta can be tough to work, especially if it's layered micarta. I'm quite happy with the way that it is looking right now, and I'm going to take it over to the buffer. However, it doesn't necessarily need to be polished. It's a huge selling point for a lot of makers to polish their frames. This frame here is good enough as it is, as you can see. Polishing it for the purpose of this video and a little bit of protection for a short period of time. We're going to finish buffing it and then we will get some bands on it. During the process of buffing, I will end up with some wax on it. I will also use the rag to go in between the forks, as my buffing wheel is a little short and I need to invest in a new one. Could do the whole entire slingshot just with a rag and some buffing compound. Before we go here, we will take one last look at this slingshot frame using some inaccurate calipers. So for an overall length, we have about 130 millimeters. For the fork width, we have almost 90 millimeters. For the fork tips, we have about 20 millimeters. End of it has a width of 22 millimeters. So lanyard bead here, which matches the red and black, as well as the black side. A little lanyard bean. As far as flaws and blemishes go, I'm going to show them. I don't mind showing the flaws and blemishes of my handmade items. They're destined to have some. Manufactured frames have flaws and blemishes, and I don't mind discussing them. It's a part of the journey. So that was there. I ended up having to remove that. In doing so, when sanding, you remove material. I did go a little bit into the forks here, a little bit deeper than I wanted to. Not very deep. It wasn't like that was a big gaping hole or anything, you know, and it does have the same thing on the other side, and that's mostly from sanding the part of the palm swell here, the bolster. On the other side, it had some material on the black here that took some very light sanding to finally get rid of. Other than that, I'm very, very happy with the way that this slingshot has turned out. I'm going to show you a close-up there. I want to take a second here to show this off and show you guys how I make my frames, how I learned to make my frames from others. I'd like to thank those others who have shared their information online as well, and I would like to thank all my viewers for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this video, and maybe there will be more. Take care, everybody.